Ciao, miei amori amici. Hello, bitter friends. I'm hanging out here with Cassie Woolheiser. We're at the London Plane down here in Pioneer Square, and we're going to be telling you all about Amaro today. I am Yasuaki Saito. I'm one of the partners here at the London Plane and part of the original crew that set up Chicory Week a few years ago off of the Local Roots Radicchio Fest. So today's session is going to be all about this bitter beverage that you may be daunted by, maybe one of your go-to drinks, but we're going to cover everything from the history of it to the culture, and then we're going to go into different styles. And then we're also going to talk about how to make your own Amaro, which we did in previous years of the Chicory Week Festival. And then we're going to finish with a cocktail or two and some stories about Amaro. The history of Amaro is closely tied to the history of winemaking. Back in the time of the Etruscans and the Greeks, winemaking was something that almost everybody had access to, and the Romans actually believed that it was as egalitarian as it could be. Eventually, we started aromatizing wine. But basically that was taking wine that was already fermented and produced and adding things to it, flowers and herbs and roots, to kind of change the flavor profile and also as a preservative method. After they started aromatizing wine, they also started refining something called distillation. Most Amaro are based on grape brandy, which is a distillate of grape juice, grape must, sometimes grappa, which you may have heard of. But in just a general overview, once they started getting the distillation down and they added these different bittering agents and floral infusions and bitter orange peel and that sort of thing, they started to define the individual styles in those areas. The cultures that exist around them are very regional. People took great pride around that. I'll start with aromatized wine, otherwise known as Vermouth. This is a Carpano Antica formula, a very famous sweet Vermouth from Italy. It is produced with a wine base. It's known for its barrel-aged flavor, which comes from probably a little bit of caramel coloring and some vanilla additive, to be honest. But it has a nice rich flavor, and it goes great in cocktails like Manhattans, where you need a little bit more heft to stand up to things like spicy rye or sweet bourbons. It's made by the Carpano family, a very famous Italian producer of Vino Amaros, aromatized wines like Vermouth. And I'm gonna taste it now. Next up is an Aperitivo style. An Aperitivo is something to kind of stimulate the appetite, popular in the cafe cultures of Italy. Gaspar Campari, his family, and he is kind of known as the grandfather of that cafe culture. You can see the bright red color here used to come from a natural dye that was produced from the cochineal, which were insects that they would dry and crush. As the drink became more popular, they went away from the natural dye and they moved to red food color. Matt over at High Side Distilling, he makes this Amaro Rosina, basically the version of Campari with that same cochineal. Really cool product. He distills with his family over on Bainbridge Island. This is using drinks like Americano, it's using Campari soda, using spritzes, which both the Aperitivo style and the Carpano Antica formula Vermouth go great in. But to be honest, all of these things go great in spritzes. And it is one of the primary elements in the Negroni, which we'll make later. But the Campari is based on that really rich bitter orange flavor, a little bit of sweetness, and then just kind of like a little flutter of an earthy bitterness. Okay, next up is one of the most famous families in Italy producing Amaro. Started by Girolamo Varnelli back in the mid-1860s. His granddaughters and great-granddaughters still operate the business, and they make this really beautiful Amaro dell'Erborista. Erborista means herbalist, and generally a lot of these styles were produced almost as a pharmaceutical or as a medicinal thing. Herbalists would use them to help people who had stomach issues. They helped people kind of into their appetites. So these, in addition to being alcoholic beverages, they were also used for a time in pharmacies. And hey guys. It is also another thing about the Alpine style, which is where this comes from, is that they're using things from the hillsides, the alpine meadows where flowers grow, the tree line where roots and bark can be harvested, and they're sweetened with wild, used to be sweetened with wild honey. They're currently sweetened with beekeeper honey, but it's another element of this Erborista that's really special. It has that kind of, adds that bitter honey note to it, as well as sweetness. And this is a super aromatic, beautiful bouquet, and is also a relatively rare bottle, which I think a lot of people who are into Amaro, hopefully that is you someday, really enjoy this one. You can also see it's unfined and unfiltered, so it's going to have a little bit more kind of grit and texture. And if you put ice in it, it will do this French term called luging, which clouds, because particulate matter in the beverage gets cold and kind of clouds the glass. Yeah, you can smell that honey straight out the gate, you know, much of that like bitter bark, beautiful, aromatic, that's special stuff. So next up, we're going to talk about a Kanato. And this is actually a pretty cool version of a Kanato. A Kanato is called such because of the cinchona bark that it is embittered with. This is called a Ferro-Kina. So they used to take the cinchona bark and they would cook it on these iron plates, which would infuse the flavor of the cinchona bark with almost like a mineral, almost iron ore kind of vibe, almost like sucking on a penny in a good way. This is a cool special product produced by the Don Ciccio e Figli family in Washington, D.C. Is a relatively rare style, so it's cool for somebody making this domestically, and for us to have access to it. Still has lightness and a little bit of spice as well. It's really, really nice stuff. So moving on from cinchona, or the Kina, we're going to a wormwood style. It is called Genopee. Wormwood is known for things like absinthe, other beverages like Genopee des Alpes. And this is a producer named Cappelletti, and they're from northern Italy in the Alto Adige. Family production, again, started as herbalists back in the day and are now producing really great Amaros. You can see that there's a little bit of a greenish tint to this. And one of the hallmarks of this style is that the wormwood kind of adds that green color. And it also adds this really beautiful, almost like a piney note to it. And it's the particular variety of wormwood is called Essentia. There's also Artemisia and a couple other different versions. Really, really beautiful. Almost feels like a lighter style, but has a really great depth of flavor. Man, so good. Next up, another one from our friends at Cappelletti. This is called a Rabarbaro. And Rabarbaro obviously comes from the cognate for rhubarb. The really cool thing about this particular one is called Sfumato, which in Italian means smoke, but they've been using a variety of Chinese rhubarb for 100 years in this recipe. It has this really beautiful, almost like sweet tart kind of line through it, but then it has this almost like smoky note as well, which is why it comes from the name Sfumato. But again, pulling all these beautiful infusions from the area around them in the Alto Adige, which is an alpine region in northern Italy. Just a tiny bit of sweetness as well. Next up, we're coming back to our friends at Don Ciccio e Figli, and this is Carciofo, a cognate for artichokes. And they use the leaves of the artichoke to embitter the spirit. Of course, they also use other things like bitter orange peel and so forth. But the great thing about this is it's in that kind of like mildly bitter, but has like a nice earthiness to it as well. Really, really classic for this style. You may have seen a product out there called Cynar, which is an Italian version of Carciofo. Yeah, it has a like earthy vegetal note to it, in addition to being kind of sweet and bitter. Next up, this is Fernette Branca from the Fratelli family in Italy. This is an acquired taste for a lot of people because it is on the darker, more intensive end of the spectrum. It is all about mentholatum and cinnamon, and is much darker and bitter, obviously in color and profile. One of our friends out there, Chandler, likes to drink a Ferninja, which is Fernette Branca and a little bit of ginger beer. I'm going to give a shout out to Chandler. Anyway, so Fernette Branca, again, acquired taste. I am from many years in the restaurant industry. This is somewhat of a rite of passage for a lot of us, especially in places like San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle, where you have a shot of Fernet after a long day behind the stick or a long shift waiting tables. Mint, cinnamon, dark toned, really great with ginger beer. Finally, there's the Tartufo. Most people can't get access to. Tartufo is obviously a truffle-based Amari from Italy. It's just really hard to get outside of Italy. So if you get a chance to grab a bottle, make sure you do, and make sure you get to share with your friends. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. So Cassie and I collaborated on this really cool product last year for Chicory Week. This is our Housemade Amaro. We wanted to make a style that was kind of like Amaro Nonino, and maybe a little bit like Amaro dell'Erborista, something that was on the lighter, more aromatic end of the spectrum. Last year, a few weeks before the start of Chicory Week, we steeped a bunch of aromatics and bittering agents in some neutral grain spirit, and this is the result. One of the cool things about all of these styles, they're all kind of classics versions of Amaro, but the real deal about Amaros, they all came regionally. We were lucky enough last year to get chicory root from Local Roots Farm, and that was one of the bittering agents. There's so much rich and deep history to Amaro and Amari. If you are looking to make your own Amaro, we do have a recipe on our website. Additionally, it's part of the Radicchio zine that we produced as part of the Chicory Week festivities, so you can check it out there. If you are looking for the different types of ingredients that we put into this, there's a really great resource locally in Seattle called the Herbalist. And if you're in Portland, I know a lot of people are tuning in for Portland, there's a place called the Herb Shop on North Mississippi. That's a little bit about how to make your own Amaro. Again, it's about building your palate, kind of figuring out what you like. Next up, we're going to talk about making a cocktail. The classic bitter cocktail is a Negroni. Equal parts gin. We are going to be using the local products from our friend Matt at Highside. Then it has a Aperitivo, Campari, and or the Amaro Recipe, and then a sweet vermouth. And the classic recipe is equal parts, but again, just like the production of your own Amaro, find out what you like and you can change those ratios. If you don't have a blast chiller at home where you could pull your glass from, you might try a really simple and easy chilling method of putting ice in it. Next up, we're going to add to our clean mixing glass here all of the ingredients. We're going to start with gin. So we're going to go 1 ounce of the gin. We're going to go 1 ounce of the Amaro Recipe or Aperitivo of your choice. And then last, we have 1 ounce of the sweet vermouth. So if you have already chilled all of your spirits down and they come from the fridge or whatever some people do, you're probably going to be stirring a little bit less, but we're going to talk about dilution on warm or room temperature spirits. We're going to add the ice to the glass. If I hold the glass, so the mixing glass, at the base, I'm going to transfer my heat from my hand to it, and it'll speed the dilution. So we're going to take the thumb, hold the top of the jar or the stirring glass, and we're going to make a rotation of the spoon. I'm going to empty that out. The reason why I'm doing that is so I can get fresh ice in a cold glass. And now we're going to take what's called a Hawthorne strainer. The iced cocktail we stirred 20 to 30 times, and we're going to pour over the top of the fresh ice. And one of the reasons why we do this is so that, again, the tiny pieces of ice that you may have broken up during your stirring process don't fall and quickly melt in the drink. When I'm zesting the orange over, or you can use lemon, so I'm going to pull over the top. As I do that, the oils and the pith kind of spray over the top of this, and I'm going to give it a nice little pinch as well, release some more of those oils, rub it around the rim, take this and toss it. Or you can set it in the glass like this for a little more aromatics as you go into sip. So good. There's tons of resources out there available to you. ChicoryWeek.com is a great option. There's a really great website called the Amaroist. On behalf of myself and everybody at Chicory Week, I'm gonna put on my mask. I'm gonna cheers with Cassie, and we're gonna sign off for the day.
Cheers.
Cheers, Wilheiser. Great to do this with you.
Great to do this with you.
Chin chin, everybody. And ciao bella, ciao bello.